Hi everyone, today I just wanted to share a video about depression, specifically my own depression and the battles I've had in the past with it. I'm only going to use my story because depression is subjective to each individual. So it's safer if I just use my own story so nobody thinks I'm talking about them or theirs or whatever. Plus, depression, the symptoms might be the same, but for everyone, the battle can be completely different. So I'm just going to share my battle and my struggles in hope that it maybe educates somebody or helps somebody even to understand it a little bit more or to even speak up about it. If you're triggered by anything I'm about to talk about in this video, please reach out to a professional, friend, family member, PA the house, someone. There's a lot of people out there who are willing to help and to listen. So don't be afraid to reach out to multiple people. If the first person you go to isn't very helpful, just keep reaching out until somebody is. So what's the difference between sadness and depression? People often ask me that question. To me, again, whatever I explain is just my own theory and my own hypothesis on things. So the difference between sadness and depression for me is sadness is over a short period. So we can be sad for a day, we can be sad for a couple of days, we can be sad for a couple of weeks. So depression is over a long period. It's sadness over a long period. So it'd be sadness for weeks, months, and even years, which would accumulate and end up as depression. So for me specifically, when I was suffering from depression over 15 years ago, it was sadness built up over a long period. And because I was repressing all of my feelings, all of my sad feelings, and I was putting on this happy face and trying to be the happy-go-lucky person. But underneath, there was a lot of turmoil. There was a lot of, toxic behaviors. There was a lot of, the internal critic was loud. And because I ignored that for a long period of time, it ended up turning into depression. First, it turned into panic attacks. Then it turned into me isolating myself in my house for about 18 months. Then it was medication, it was Prozac and Xanax. And then over a long period, it turned into depression. So much so, again, if you want to know my full story, guys, if you're looking at this on Instagram, you can go to my bio, which is my page, and there's a link to my documentary there. And if you're looking at it, looking at this video on Facebook, the documentary will be pinned to the top of my Facebook page. If you want to know more, I'm not going to get into it now because it's not about that. So what was the feelings like for me when I was suffering from depression? First off, the signs of depression, some of the signs for depression for me that I suffered with at the time was isolation. I wanted to isolate myself. I did not want to leave my house. I did not even at times want to leave my bedroom. I had a paranoid feeling then after a certain amount of time that if I left my house, all of my neighbours and everyone in the town was judging me, was going to come to the window and look out and point and judge me, whatever, which was a false narrative I built in my head. But this is what depression done to me. It made me build all of these, well, it didn't make me build all of these. I built these false narratives in my head that I was going to be judged by everybody. When I suffered from depression, it was back in the early noughties, so back in 2004, 2006 time, more towards 2006. So at that time, there wasn't that many people that was vocal about mental illness or mental health. So I thought I was the only person in my whole town and county, and at times even country, that felt like I suffered from depression. So I felt like I was going to be judged and ridiculed when I left the house, which was false. I wasn't going to be. There was a lot of people out there who, number one, didn't care, and number two, would probably want to help more so than anything, But I built this false narrative, which fed into me staying inside and isolating myself even more. Eating habits was another thing. Some days I wouldn't eat, and I would starve myself for a few days, and then other days I would overeat and make myself sick. So I was very confused. I didn't understand my body. I didn't understand whether I was hungry or whether I wasn't hungry or whatever it may be. So between undereating and overeating, I suffered from both. And for some people, it could be one. Some people can suffer from depression and they can just undereat and just stop eating. because their body is in constant fight or flight. So the anxiety is racing through their body, and it's just very hard to eat when you're in that state. And for other people, they can overeat, they can comfort eat. For me, I had two. Some weeks I would overeat, and then some weeks I would undereat, and I would starve myself for a few days. If I was to look back, and it was probably more overeating than it was undereating. I put on a lot of weight, which didn't help with my confidence and self-esteem. Another thing I felt was shame and embarrassment when I had depression, even though there was no need to feel it. In retrospect, I knew that was a bad thing, and it wasn't necessarily true, because when I had depression, I felt a significant amount of shame and embarrassment, only for the simple fact is because I thought I was the only person suffering from depression, and I thought this was going to be something that my family would have to deal with for the rest of their life. So I had this amount of shame, as in I brought shame to my family. I'm embarrassing my family. It wasn't about myself more so. It was more so about my family, and I was bringing shame on them. It was like they have a son or they have a sibling who suffers from this illness, and I didn't think I was going to ever be cured or healed or whatever it may be. So I felt a huge amount of shame and embarrassment that I have to put my family through this. And that was the depression making me feel that, again, as I said, in retrospect, for me to look back, there was nothing but love and care, and they were trying their hardest, and there was no indication, there was no proof or evidence that my family were embarrassed of me. So I put this on myself. Of this I labeled myself sick. I labeled myself your embarrassment on your family and stuff, which was false in the grand scheme of things. Whatever, I just built that false narrative. Also, for me, when I was going through depression, between isolating myself, I didn't want anyone to contact me, so friends, any of that kind of stuff. After a certain amount of time, I just, I stopped texting people back. I stopped phoning everybody, and then at times I even got angry when they didn't ring and phone me, even though sometimes I wouldn't respond to them. So again, I was trying to pull back from people because I was ashamed and embarrassed and I was paranoid. But then when they stopped reaching out, then I got into a darker hole then, going, nobody cares anymore. And I became, for me, just me, I became very kind of maybe selfish with my depression and my anxiety and panic attacks. I became very much about, what about me? Nobody cares about me. I'm sick. Look at me. And I just remember having that kind of feeling. And again, that was something I was kind of, I was putting that on myself because, again, if I was to look back, my friends were probably making a huge amount of effort. My family definitely were. But for me, I didn't feel like it was enough because it wasn't helping in a way, because I probably wasn't helping myself. Again, there was a lot of things that were probably adding to that. For me, medication and tablets at the time probably wasn't the best for me. It did not work for me, but that's not to say to do definitely work for people. And I think medication and therapy in tandem together can be very potent and a very good way for dealing with depression. But at the time, I was just taking the medication and it wasn't with therapy. I tried therapy, but I was very resistant against it. Again, it was probably a mix of the right therapist and the right time for me to be in therapy. But I felt like the therapist at the time just didn't understand where I was coming from. And again, that's what I always swore when I was a therapist, that I was going to be real, I was going to be human, and I was going to show people that I have suffered. And sometimes I continue to suffer from different things, confidence, self-esteem, self-worth issues, whatever. And I want people who are coming to me to understand that I am human. I'm not going to be that person who's just going to nod and kind of go along with things, whatever. And I'm going to be. I work as a humanistic therapist, so I'm going to meet the person where they am, and I'm going to show them that I am human too, and we can do this together. But anyway, off topic. So depression is completely subjective for everybody. It's not going to be the same. Some of the symptoms might be the same, but the battles and the stories maybe behind the battles can be completely different. So what happened for me to get out of depression is, again, I opened up and I talked. It wasn't to a therapist. It was, again, if you go and watch my documentary, it was to a guy called Jerry Loftus. I ended up opening up and talking to him and telling him my story. And through that, he was able to navigate through my own battles and struggles and instill a bit of confidence and self-esteem back in me. And I rode that momentum that which helped me get out. And for me, people always use metaphors and analogies when it comes to depression, but for me, depression was like this cloud that followed me every day. I remember my mom actually asking me, what is it like? And when you're trying to explain depression to people who don't have depression, it can be very, very difficult, because unless you kind of suffer from it, it's very hard for you to um, to get the concept of depression. What is it? To understand it completely. But for me, it was like I had a dark cloud. People say it's like the black dog, I think it is, and the dark cloud and the shadow and whatnot. For me, it was like a dark cloud that just followed me everywhere. The minute I woke up, it just consumed me for the whole day, and it ended up contaminating my life throughout every day. But my mom asked me one time, what is it like? And God love my parents and family, because they did not understand. At that time, they had no clue. As I said, there was nobody vocal about having depression over, 15 years ago, 10 to 15 years ago. Now it's more mainstream, which is great. But I said to my mom, it was like fighting someone who was 7 foot tall every day. It was like the minute I woke up, I just had to fight. And it was just fight and fight and fight and fight. And I just got so tired from fighting that I told her there's times where I'm so tired at night that I would stay up. My sleeping pattern was another indication that I was suffering. Like staying up all night till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and then sleeping, till lunchtime, and then getting up, and just my body clock was all over the place. But I told my mother that I was so tired from fighting in the evenings that I used to pray when I was closing my eyes that I would die. And I used to pray like tears in my eyes, praying to God, praying to somebody, dead relatives, every person, anyone. Just I prayed, please God, when I close my eyes, that I will not open them again, because I was just so tired from fighting myself. This what felt like a 7 foot figure every single day that just I couldn't beat, I couldn't kill, I couldn't do whatever. It was just this constant battle. And I know people, when it comes to depression, when they don't understand it and somebody ends up taking their own life, there can be a lot of blame and shame and all that kind of stuff with it. But when I went to take my own life, wholeheartedly, and this is God honest and being completely transparent here, I didn't think of my family. I didn't really think of the aftermath. I didn't think of what they might inherit when I left, like my pain would become their pain for the rest of their lives. I never thought about that, because I just thought about my own suffering to stop. I just thought about my own pain. I just wanted it to stop so bad. I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired. And that's what it is. And so when people say, oh, when somebody takes their own life, it's selfish, I think I can understand where they're coming from. But if you've ever suffered from depression, you kind of do understand, if somebody does take their own life, what the struggle is about and how it can bring you to your knees, that you were begging for your life to be taken in multiple ways, so you don't have to do it yourself. And then sometimes you are brought to your knees so bad that you end up either going to attempt to take it or whatever. It's incredibly difficult to put into words. But all I would suggest is when you do have words around depression, or somebody is trying to talk to you about sadness or depression, is to have an open mind and heart. You don't have to understand it to help people. You just need to listen. You just need to comfort. You don't need to give people 100 answers. I'm suffering from depression. Okay, go for a run, go for a cycle, do some meditations, like pump the brakes. Just listen, just sit with them and listen. It doesn't have to be, let's solve this, let's rally around the person, whatever. It's just be there. Just listen. They already might be overwhelmed by feeling like they want to kill themselves and take their own lives. So what's another, 10 people shoving 100 ideas down their throat going to do to them? Like, it's not productive and it's not good. Sit with the person, listen. Ask the person. If somebody's suffering from depression, don't be afraid to ask them, are you thinking about taking your own life? Do you have suicidal ideation? Are you thinking about taking your own life? Ask them. Ask them. Don't be afraid to ask somebody that. And I think when the other person responds, it makes it real. Whether it's a yes or no or whatever. But it also shows care too that you do value their life and them in your life. So when it comes to depression, I think when the language around it, I know I'm a bit all over the place with this guy, so hopefully you're still with me. But when it comes to the language around it, just be careful. I often hear people like, oh my God, I was so depressed last week, but I'm okay now. Like, were you? Were you like, I don't know, maybe you were, but maybe there was sadness or like a deep level of sadness, but depression is a whole different animal altogether. So when somebody has depression, another person walks up and goes, oh yeah, I had depression, like I had depression a few weeks ago, but I'm okay now. It kind of undermines how the person who has depression might be feeling. It's like, oh, well, they got rid of it in a week or two. Well, what's wrong with me? They start questioning themselves. So just be careful of your language around depression. Just because you're sad doesn't mean you have depression. Depression, as I said, is usually over a long period and, months and years of sadness. It's not just something you get for a day or two and kind of, I was depressed last week and now I'm fine. That's probably more sadness than depression. But again, that's only my own opinion. But your language around it matters. So just watch when you are saying you're depressed or, oh yeah, I was depressed once, or kind of undermining someone who might be coming to you to tell you that they are depressed. Again, I am conscious of the time. I really don't want this to run over kind of 20 minutes. If anybody has any questions about depression, by all means, you can reach out. You can contact me publicly or privately. I'll answer any questions about depression and about my story. Again, if you want to know more about my story, there's a documentary, as I said, on my Instagram and my bio or my Facebook pinned at the top of the page. But hopefully this will help somebody out there. If you are suffering, I completely empathize with you. I completely understand what it's like. But I don't mean this in an insensitive way, but it is temporary and it can be temporary. And temporary for me might have been a few months, but it is possible. You can get through this, but it's probably going to take some time, and it's going to take some patience, and it's probably going to take some help. So don't be afraid to reach out. The best thing I ever done was reach out. And it wasn't until then that I reached out and I vocalized how I was actually feeling. And the stuff I was feeling was from a child. The stuff I was bottling up was from years and years of stuff. And that's my own stuff. Maybe someday I'll share that too. But again, it wasn't until I verbalized it and I got it all out that I was able to kind of put it together, and people were able to put it together and help me put it together, that I was able to understand what my depression was about, why I was feeling this certain pain and suffering. So again, don't be afraid to talk. Don't be afraid to reach out. There's professionals out there. There's free call lines, Pieta House. Every person who picks up that phone in Pieta House, in my understanding, is a qualified therapist. So do not be afraid to reach out. Again, hopefully this might help somebody. Again, sorry if you are suffering. I completely empathize with you. Please keep fighting. Please keep going. Please just take one day at a time. Don't be afraid to reach out, open up, talk, say something to somebody, ring somebody. Just please, you're loved more than you probably recognize and realize. And the world needs you, so please reach out. Other than that, hopefully I explained depression. Hopefully people have a little bit more of an understanding of how consuming it can be, and yeah, how it can just contaminate your life in all aspects, mental, physical health, emotional, everything. So again, hopefully this will help. If anyone has any questions, please reach out. I hope you all have a good day and a good week. I'll chat to you later. Bye bye.